Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri, and we're going to be turning our attention to one of the most urgent and contentious stories in international law and global solidarity. Back in September 2025, the Global Summit Flotilla, the largest civilian maritime mission since 2007, set sail to break what legal experts describe as an unlawful and genocidal blockade imposed by Israel on Gaza. For nearly 2 decades, the blockade has engineered what UN experts now call a man-made famine, the policy of caloric control, the deprivation of food, medicine, fuel, and the sealing off of Gaza from the outside world, which has sparked wide accusations of war crimes against humanity, apartheid, and genocide against Israel. And joining us this morning is Bluen, a South African attorney, researcher, and activist with the Global Summit Flotilla. She was part of the legal support unit, and she was part of those that have authored a major legal report titled Legal Assessment of the Global Summit Flotilla, Civil Resistance to an Unlawful Blockade. Bluen argues that the blockade violates every pillar of international law, from the law of the sea to just cogent norms, and that breaking the siege to deliver humanitarian aid is not only a moral imperative but a legal duty as well. But the mission is also deeply contested. Critics have labeled the flotilla as propaganda, as you would expect, and terror-linked activism, raising real questions about whether or not you are supposed to make these kinds of accusations when there's a whole people, millions and millions of people who are currently starving, children, men, women, innocent, who are surviving a genocide parallel to a blockade on much needed humanitarian aid and food. And Joe is joining us via our virtual platform to give us a bit more insight on this legal assessment. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Always a pleasure having you on air.
Thank you so much, Salayaloa, and greetings to your viewers and listeners at home. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Always a pleasure. I think let's jump right into it. In summary, this report, the legal assessment of the Global Summit Flotilla, civil resistance to an unlawful blockade. If you could just give a short synopsis of its findings to our listeners and what it entails, and why was it so important to have such a report after the Global Summit Flotilla and everything that happened around it.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. And the title is definitely a mouthful. But we were part of a team that was watching the flotilla and the various interceptions and other violations of international law by the apartheid regime of Israel. And so we were watching this and monitoring it, and part of our role was to produce a report. And we started off kind of thinking about quite a lot of the conventional things, the violation of maritime law, laws of the sea, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And then obviously we looked at it in terms of the laws of war around naval blockades. And there we found it to be, the blockade on Gaza, which I think is not surprising to many South Africans, but certainly abroad is not something that people talk about so much. But that this is the disproportionate use of a naval blockade, the use of it primarily to starve civilians, makes it unlawful. So even if there wasn't a genocide, which there is, it would be a war crime, a violation of maritime law. What we've said now, and it's largely as a result of the increasing jurisprudence that has come out, for example, from the ICJ, from many Palestinian human rights organizations, from international human rights organizations, this very clear consensus that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. What we've said, which I think is quite the push here, is that, if you look at Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, where one of the genocidal acts are to create the conditions of life that can bring about the destruction of a group in whole or in part. And one of the things that we argue in the report is that the siege, the starvation campaign, needs to be seen as part of a genocidal act where it's a kind of slow massacre by malnutrition, a settlement by starvation, where you are trying to settle a territory, an entire land, using starvation as your tool and instrument of genocide. And it is also an indicator of genocide.
I think very, very important. And it almost ties down to my next question. I took a look at the report and just briefly read through it. And one thing that jumped at me is that in the report, it is described that Israel's starvation policy essentially being a settler colonial domination by starvation, and compares to the caloric control regime to historical genocidal practices. Can you unpack that? And if starvation is now recognized as a war crime under the Rome Statute?
So yes, so starvation, so use of starvation is recognized as a war crime. And one of the things is that in the ICJ, South Africa versus ICJ case, in the 2024 ruling, sorry, I don't have my file open. It was held that withholding unhindered access to humanitarian aid was one of the requirements upon Israel. So yeah, it's a war crime. And it is and as we've said, is a genocidal act. And I think what you're seeing is, you've seen it throughout history. If you look at just north of us, over Herero and Nama, the German genocide of the over Herero and Nama people, it was similar to, and I really want to maintain that the Nazi Holocaust in Europe and North Africa was a settler colonial genocidal act that was a sort of colonialism in Europe against people not racialized as white at the time, and we see that also in the caloric control used by Nazis in Germany and throughout German colonized Africa. We see it in Kenya. We've seen it throughout history, the use of starvation to coerce a population into submission to unreasonable terms. And that's how it's been used. And even if you look at the First World War, which is an interesting moment because it's actually Lord Balfour from the UK who signed the Balfour Declaration, who also was involved in the First World War blockade, which continued after the armistice to get the Germans to agree, to get them to agree to certain positions in the armistice. So I think you've got this situation where you've seen a long history of starvation being used as a tactic of war and as a tool of genocide in the context where a colonizing, occupying power is trying to garner a certain response from the besieged community.
Very, very important. I want to come back to the flotilla. Your legal team states that breaking the blockade by sea is not only permissible, but it's also a legal obligation under international humanitarian law. How is humanitarian access framed as a legal duty and not an act of defiance?
I think that's a really interesting question. And I think that there's maybe a slight confusion here. What we are saying is that if we look at the Genocide Convention, that it implies a duty on all states to act in the case. It's a positive duty, right? It's not just a negative duty to refrain from committing genocide. It's a positive duty to act to punish or prevent genocide wherever it happens. Now, that is an obligation on states. When states are not doing this, you're absolutely right. It is an act of defiance where the people aboard the flotilla went to do this act of civil resistance. But the duty falls on the state.
Very, very important. There have been critics that argue that the flotilla is a propaganda stunt of some sort. Some are saying it's even aligned with extremist networks. How do you respond to those claims, and that the mission is political theater rather than humanitarian necessity?
I think there's a few things. First of all, I mean, how much attention do we give to fascists who lie in the media? Would be my first question, and it's part of an ongoing Hasbara campaign in this country and elsewhere. I went on a TV interview. I will not name. I mean, I could. Straight after, it is sort of around just when the while the activists were in prison, and the person called it, I don't even remember what they used, but these terms that really are designed. So, for example, calling it the global Hamas flotilla or the terrorist flotilla, which is what was used in the context where there's a law being passed to use the death penalty on political prisoners accused of terrorism. You're making a very clear point that you're exercising a threat against peaceful activists. So that would be the first thing. The second thing, I mean, I think that people also like to dunk on people's activism. I think that people did an incredibly brave thing. I think people continue to do incredibly brave things. I think it was about delivering humanitarian access. I think it was also about showing that this blockade is not invincible, and the one boat, the Marinette, that did breach the blockade, it didn't reach all the way to Gaza, but it went there's 9 nautical miles off the shore. So yeah, I think it is many things at once. One of which is delivering humanitarian aid, and the stocks that they had were very impressive. You had 42 vessels, not quite what you'd have with a state taking up its responsibility, but it's not bad. It's better than the besieged, the kind of amount of food that is being accessed under the siege.
No, most definitely. Under maritime law, there's an argument that you guys have placed forward that civilian aid vessels in international waters are protected, and that intercepting them amounts to piracy. What protections are there specifically that the law actually provides, and how has Israel violated them during the Global Summit flotilla?
So Israel, so how it works, I mean, the maritime law, the boundaries get quite complex, but there's basically a few things that we need to hold in at once. One is that there's international waters. Israel did conduct an interception in international waters. The other place they conducted an interception, so then you have territorial waters. So like Tunisia's territorial water, where Israel conducted a drone attack, 2 drone attacks on 2 of the main vessels of the flotilla. Then you have Palestine's territorial waters, and the shelf that guides that, and then you'd have Israel's territorial waters, which I mean, even if you take that seriously, the flotilla did not enter those waters. But what is required under maritime law is to allow for safe passage for civilian vessels, with certain conditions, none of which were breached. So essentially, and it comes from a private property legal system. It's from private international law, where you're actually trying to guarantee the rights to trade, which, as you know, I'm sure people love money. So it's actually to protect. It's come to protect civilians, but it was also to protect civilian vessels trading, so that they weren't intercepted from reaching the shores of where they were going to trade. So if we take this today, you have to provide safe passage to civilians, and that was denied by the interceptions.
No, very important. Lastly, before I let you go, Joe, beyond the flotilla itself, how is this evidence going to be used by you guys? Whether it's ICC referrals or just, I don't know, universal jurisdiction laws of some sort, ICJ. This report, are there plans to use it in other ways beyond the flotilla?
Yeah, so there is a well, I mean, the plans, we just wrote the report. And
I'm sorry, I got excited.
Can we have a break? It was submitted yesterday. It was released yesterday. Or Sunday, I think. We have there are some plans underway. I know that one of the legal groups is looking at reclaiming the vessels. And there's various legal groups working on various different things. So I think hold out for a little bit. You might see some interesting things emerging in the next little while. We also, it's also the responsibility of states and other actors to take this forward. And we hope that it might be a supportive resource for mechanisms to hold accountable the Israeli state for its genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, acts of aggression, and many other forms of violence.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much, Joe, for breaking down those legal, moral, and political dimensions of this moment. The Global Sumo Flotilla, I think, was a brilliant initiative. We hope to see more of it. And kudos to you and your team. Wonderful work that's being done. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us on the show. Take care.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye.
There you go. For those that want to read the full legal report or to follow the flotilla's documentation work, links and resources are available through the Global Sumo Network. You can just give them a quick Google and you can look at the report. The Global Sumo Flotilla was such a big, I think, moment when it comes to Palestinian activism, and it's a story that should not die. It's a story that we should continue following and interacting with, and hope to see more flotillas as time goes by. I know there's a ceasefire now, but the blockade is still ongoing. Not enough food and aid is getting into Gaza at this present moment, and the momentum should not die. We're going to take a quick break. News and views will be continuing after this.